My name's Arthur. Thank you for joining me as we read in Matthew chapter 5, a passage that's called the Beatitudes, out of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount covers 3 chapters, and it outlines a way of living which is uncomfortable for us, because it is not the natural way we are inclined to live. It is indeed the standard that Jesus sets when he rules the world. This will be the law that he will judge us by. Not just the external appearance of things, but what's going on in the heart. But these Beatitudes, the beginning of this Sermon on the Mount, focus on saying that God is blessing us when things seem to go wrong. God has a purpose for everything. Some people make excuses not believing in God because of war, because of accidents, because inexplicable things happen whereby people are hurt and suffer, and we do not understand why these things occur. We can say, well, where is God in these things? Well, the Bible makes it plain God is very much in the middle of these things. But God's purposes are not my purposes, are not your purposes. So you have a tree in your garden and you decide to chop it down. Now, it's very painful, in a sense, for the tree to be chopped down. But you are supervising the whole scene, and you have determined that this tree must go, for whatever reason. Whether it's got borer in it and it's sick, whether you're wanting to build an outhouse and it's in the way, whatever. You have a purpose. So God has a purpose even for the bad things that happen. War? Do we blame God for war? Well, God blames us, men, for their own actions. Nevertheless, he still is involved and limits what happens. So Jesus is outlining a different way of living, a different way of viewing the world, a different set of attitudes which are in line with his thinking rather than with our natural inclination. Let's read Matthew chapter 5 verses 1 to 12, and we'll focus on the hardest part of this, the fact that God's people are reviled, are persecuted, are falsely maligned, and Jesus tells us to rejoice and be exceedingly glad, because there is a purpose in heaven for us. Matthew chapter 5. Seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. May the Lord bless his word to us. He's addressing his disciples. We think it's bad to be poor, much better to be rich. To be rich means that you have some control over your circumstances. If your car is broken, you can afford to fix it. If your health is broken, you can go to the doctor and pay to get treatment. So it is much better, in our thinking, to be wealthy than to be poor. And here we have a person who's poor in spirit. I guess a person who does not seem to achieve very much in this world. We all like heroes, the ones who win the Olympic Games, or the ones who are great in business, or who gain first place in any area of endeavour. But the majority of people are not like that. The majority of people just live ordinary, boring lives. But Jesus is saying, Heaven is going to be full of those people. Many of his parables teach the same principle. Where is the blessing in sorrow? Blessed are those who mourn. The blessing is in comfort. When the Thessalonians were distressed because some of their number had died, Paul tells them to comfort one another with the hope of resurrection. Death will be defeated. That's what the gospel is all about. Death is not the end. It is a temporary separation, and we experience those all the time. But death is not the end. Death will be destroyed, and those who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ have everlasting life. So there is comfort in death for the righteous, and we who remain should be comforted in that. Who are the meek? Blessed are the meek. The meek are those who are mistreated and suffer that mistreatment without complaining. So often something goes wrong, just a little thing, and we complain bitterly and make a big noise about it. We have been deprived. We want our rights. No, Jesus said we can forego anything now. If somebody wants to take your shirt, let him have your coat as well. If he makes you do something extra for him in return. Because those who are meek shall inherit the earth. They're the ones who shall come and dwell in the new heavens and new earth, where righteousness dwells. And then there are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They shall be satisfied. Mercy. It's much better for our back pocket if we are not merciful, if we don't forgive debts but demand that people pay their debts. And when we see someone who is in need, if we do not help them in their need. But Jesus says, if you are merciful to others, then you will receive mercy from others. And you need mercy. So be merciful. And then the pure in heart. Do we want to keep clean? Or do we fill our minds with dirty thoughts, our heart with dirty desires? If we keep ourselves pure, we shall see God. The peacemakers. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He is the Son of God. And our role in life is to be at peace with one another, with all men, and with God. And sometimes God's people are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Those who do the right thing will be rewarded, even though they pay sometimes a huge price now. Indeed, Jesus says, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven when you are targeted because you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. The greatest blessing of all is to be identified with the Lord Jesus Christ, so that the opposition of the world that is directed against him comes upon you. Blessed are you when they revile you, and they persecute you, and they speak all kinds of evil against you. It's not true. When that happens, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, because you will be rewarded in heaven. You have confessed the Lord Jesus Christ, and he will confess you before your Father. You join the company of the exalted ones, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. When we read through, we find not only Jesus, James, Peter, Paul, all emphasize the fact that in this world we shall have trouble, and we should rejoice in that, meekly and patiently enduring. For this builds our faith, builds our confidence in God, and great will be our reward in heaven.